is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Aisha Sasay, live in Los Angeles, where it's just gone 11 p.m. on the West Coast.
And I'm John Force. Great to have you with us. We continue with the breaking news out of Phoenix, Arizona, where Donald Trump has delivered an angry and divisive speech, which has left many asking if this president can unite the country. Others now questioning his fitness for office. The U.S. president defended his much criticized response to the violence in Charlottesville, Virginia, but made no mention of his reference to blaming both sides for the violence.
Well, outside the rally, police used tear gas and smoke grenades against protesters. Police say the demonstrators were throwing rocks and bottles at officers. Most have dispersed at this point. Listen to what the president had to say.
But I spoke out forcefully against hatred, bigotry, and violence. In the media and the fake media, they make up stories. They have no sources in many cases. But Sheriff Joe can feel good. If we have to close down our government, we're building that wall. So I think we'll end up probably terminating NAFTA at some point. I don't believe that any president has accomplished as much as this president in the first 6 or 7 months. I really don't believe.
Just a sample there of the highlights of the speech. So for more, joining us now are Democratic strategist Caroline Heldman and CNN political commentators, Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson and Republican consultant John Thomas.
Also with us, Republican strategist Austin James, Cypress College political science professor Peter Mathews, and in Phoenix, CNN's Miguel Marquez. Miguel, if I can start with you, what's the situation like where you are right now?
Well, it's cleaned up. They're actually sweeping up, and some of that pepper spray and tear gas is starting to be if I start coughing uncontrollably, you'll know why. It's just being tossed up into the air. Phoenix police say that there were 4 arrests tonight. 3 of them were related to the protests. 1 of them was unrelated to it. There were 2 police officers who suffered some heat exhaustion as well. They portray this as an operation gone well. They say that there was tear gas thrown by protesters at police, but I can tell you that I was at the very point where it started, which was right down here where these barricades are. There were 2 water bottles thrown by protesters at the police. When they did that, without any warning, without any announcement, Phoenix police then fired off a single round of pepper spray, these little pepper bullets that they fire. That's when it set off the crowd, and that's when things got very, very intense here. They liberally use pepper spray, those little balls of pepper spray, tear gas, and the flashbang grenades, firing them over the heads of protesters to try to get them to disperse. It took a good hour and a half, 2 hours. Protesters had been here in 107-degree heat. What is it, about 42 degrees Celsius heat for much of the day. And they were loud. They were angry, for the most part peaceful. But when those 2 water bottles had been thrown, that's what set things off. They had thrown water bottles here and there throughout the day, taunting the Trump supporters as they walked into the convention center. But the police clearly had had enough just as the president was wrapping up and about to finish and about to leave the venue. That's when they moved in with great force against the protesters. Certainly not the picture that Phoenix want to present to the world tonight. They were treating this as a major event like the Super Bowl. They had all hands on deck, including the National Guard. This is something I think that the mayor and the police chief say that they will have an after-action report now, but it was clear that they moved in very, very quickly and with great force against protesters who were, for the most part, exercising their First Amendment rights of free speech.
Miguel Marquez there, joining us from Phoenix, Arizona. Miguel, we appreciate the reporting. Go get some water and wash that gas and that pepper spray out of your eyes. Thank you.
Miguel there, 11:04 in the evening, all of this wrapping up. Okay, so there was a lot to get to with this speech. It was a speech which started out relatively normally. The scripted part was a call for unity. Americans need to come together. And then came this broadside against the media. And, you know, it was off to the races. So I want to go to Peter first. What's going on here with this president? Because at times he seemed angry, agitated. There was some bizarre and, you know, some blatantly incorrect statements which he kept making over and over again.
It's unbelievable. Actually, he's facing a crisis of legitimacy, as we call in political science and sociology. Legitimacy is the authority to use power because of rightness, because of being right in doing so. It means people acknowledge your power, your decision-making, and they trust you with what you're doing. But in this case, this president's been all over the place. He says one thing one day, the opposite the next day. And to actually come out with falsehoods when he says, for example, that he will make sure that the reform in Obamacare would include pre-existing conditions, and when he proposes it doesn't include it. So many contradictions, and people are wondering, can he even handle foreign policy with North Korea, for example, where he pushes the country to the brink rather than negotiating. There's a lot of question of legitimacy here, and it's just an example of his position of lack of legitimacy in the eyes of the majority of American voters, apparently, especially according to the polls right now.
John Thomas, to you, as a Republican, I mean, this was a speech which, you know, showed the president once again as someone who struggles to let things go. He brought up Charlottesville again, brought up all the statements that were made, and just seemed very, very angry. Is this the speech you expected from Donald Trump on this night?
It was. I mean, this is classic Trump. I would call this the back to basics Trump, and I'm actually glad we saw this Trump tonight, because Trump was starting to drift. Tonight he went back to the things that got him elected. Talk about, we're going to do whatever we need to do to build that wall. In fact, if it requires shutting down the government, that's how important it is to me to build that wall. He talked about jobs. He talked about immigration numbers being down. I mean, he was hitting all the points. Yes, he did talk about fake news and fake media, something that is
You're looking at me?
No, but I'm saying, but this is a standard rallying point. I thought what we saw tonight was Trump at his best.
Whoa, Caroline.
I'm going to say that he looked unhinged. I think that Republicans, many of them, see Trump through what I call Trump goggles, where they're in a state of denial about how bad it is. I think he's lost legitimacy. I think he lost a lot of moral authority in the past week when he leveled Nazis with protesters, and he didn't help his case. He did not help his case this evening, right? He didn't talk about the people who lost their lives on the USS John McCain, but he went after John McCain, who's battling cancer, the fight of his life.
It's not fair to give somebody a pass, and John McCain's a hero, and I wish him a speedy recovery.
It's stupid
but he
politics.
hurt the Republican Party by the vote he cast.
But you don't. But Donald Trump looked like a child going after him. It's not smart politics to go after someone who's battling brain cancer.
Let me bring Austin James here as a JP strategist again. Was it smart politics? Was it smart to make this speech? To John's point, this was a speech that hit all the notes, but was this the time to make this particular speech?
Listen, I'll echo John. I think this was his greatest hits. I mean, he's playing what worked from the campaign. I think, you know, listen, if John or I were maybe in his speech writing team, this maybe not the way we would have done it. But I think what you're seeing is that he's constantly keeping the media off kilter. Right? I mean, listen, I think his team probably wanted 3, 4, 5 more days of what he talked about yesterday, some of that good press coverage to be out there. Listen, what we're talking about on this desk right now is not what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago when I was here, which is the special counsel. And I think there is a method to his madness. And I think if you look at his polling numbers, you're not going to see a change in those who support him coming into this.
But I think the issue, right, is like the method to his madness is he's got an agenda that in a platform that he campaigned on, but he's failed time and again to deliver it. The reality is that the New York Times came out today earlier reporting that Donald Trump hasn't even had any conversations with Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republican Senate, obviously, almost in a month. And the last conversation that they had, they were spewing, outrage at each other over the health care bill. The reality is Donald Trump hasn't been able to deliver for his constituents, and that's why you're seeing this erosion of his poll numbers, particularly in some of these key states, the Rust Belt states. NBC put out a poll yesterday, Michigan, Wisconsin, another state, and they had approval ratings around 35%. These are states that ultimately helped him propel to victory, and I think that's a big issue for him moving forward as we look to 2018.
You're one of the strangest moments. There were a lot of strange moments. You may think it was his greatest hits. There were some strange moments. It was just when he went after the media, he went after the mainstream media, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN. And this is part of what he said. Take a look.
The live red lights, they're turning those suckers off fast, I'll tell you. They're turning those lights off fast. Like CNN does not want its falling viewership to watch what I'm saying tonight, I can tell.
Austin, he was accusing us of not broadcasting his speech. And you know where I saw that? On CNN.
Yeah, it was wall to wall.
I mean, this was I mean, I'm sorry.
Okay, listen, I mean,
this is a little divorce from reality at the very least.
Sure, but I mean, you know, it's one of those things where you can kind of put your finger in the air and see where the wind's blowing. Look at the people behind him. I mean, as soon as he drops these one-liners, the people erupted. I mean, he was playing to his crowd. He wasn't having an intellectual debate. And I think we need to be clear about that.
May I say something? The only problem is the people behind him represent 33% of the population, the voting population. His numbers have dropped tremendously from when he got elected. His approval rating is way down in all the polls. Doesn't matter if it's a poll that's sampling voters or sampling general public. So he's going, those people behind him may be his loyal supporters, but he cannot win re-election with them. That needs to become more legitimate with other people, with the rest of America, by reaching out to people and using some of the tradition and charisma and legality which most people who are legitimate actually rely on as leaders of the country.
Well, Peter, I want to stay with you because I want all of us to take a listen to something else the president had to say about the media, because he did go on about the media
a lot.
For well over 20 minutes, let's be clear. Because he didn't just say the media, he didn't say we are just bad people. He took it a step further. Take a listen.
For the most part, honestly, these are really, really dishonest people, and they're bad people. And I really think they don't like our country. I really believe that.
Peter, the President of the United States saying the media doesn't like this country. He really does believe that. A free media is one of the pillars of American democracy. I mean, democracy, what's his end game here?
It is very dangerous because now he's vilifying the character of a major institution that's important for democracy as a mediating influence. And he's just calling them evil. He could use the word evil and saying they're bad people. You don't negotiate with bad people or with evil. And that is very dangerous. He's vilifying anyone who doesn't agree with him as being anti-American. And that is going back to not just McCarthyism, but perhaps worse even toward fascism or something like in what was going on in Germany before Hitler or when he came to power, as he was coming to power. It's something you have to really watch out for.
I know you want to respond to that. I just want to get this one response that we had from the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, because a lot of people out there are now questioning this president's fitness for office. Clapper took it one step further.
Is he a threat to national security, the president?
Well, he certainly could be. Again, having some understanding of the levers that a president can exercise, I worry about, frankly, you know, the access to nuclear codes. If he, in a fit of pique, he decides to do something about Kim Jong-un, there's actually very little to stop him.
Caroline, when James Clapper is worried about the president having access to the nuclear codes, should we all be worried about the president having the access to the nuclear codes?
Yes, and I think many of us are. And I think it's time for the Republicans to step up and put their country before their party. It is time to look at what 40% of Americans want, which is impeachment. It is time to look at the possibility that his fitness might be compromised by mental health issues or cognitive issues. I mean, this is a man who couldn't find his limo coming off a plane. This is a man who didn't know where he was in the middle of a presser with Netanyahu. This is a man, anytime he's not on script, sounds like a rambling person, a rambling press conference, Kofefi. I mean, how much more do we need to question his fitness?
As much as I respect you, I don't think you have a medical degree, and I think it's absurd that the media plays into this by trying to diagnose his mental
You think
state.
this is normal?
Because you didn't agree with the words in a speech.
No. His
Doesn't make him
actions
unfit?
aren't normal. His actions, he is unhinged in his speech. He doesn't know where his limo is.
I think
he doesn't know where he is.
What's not fair about Clapper's remarks, I think, is that we're coming off of last night, the Afghanistan speech, which I thought, as a Republican, he hit all the right notes.
Sure.
So,
well,
you know,
from Trump, though.
But so what? He signed off, and even Mattis said today that he had had a thorough review of the procedure, what we should do in Afghanistan. So, you know, all of a sudden, Clapper said, hey, I'm not trusting with the nuclear codes. But last night, he did a great job.
I mean, that is a first statement.
You didn't like Trump at a rally? I mean...
Well, he is dovetailing his campaign side with his presidential side, and I think that makes people uneasy, and it's very difficult to defend if I'm sitting on your side of the aisle, but I don't think that makes him necessarily unfit.
Last word to Dave.
I don't think it takes an Einstein to know that this country right now needs healing. He's ripping us apart at our seams, and he came off as a repulsive, menacing, mad person. And the reality is we need a stable leader who can lead our country and move us forward. And the reality is when you have national security experts who are widely respected among Republicans and Democrats, Democrats saying these kinds of things, that's very scary for our country.
Very quickly,
Okay, let me talk about national security for just a minute, please. Yeah. Clapper's statement is very important because think of what he did with Kim Jong-un in the middle of this crisis where he keeps escalating, and brinkmanship. For example, when Kim Jong-un said, we're not going to fire those 4 missiles at Guam, the president should have actually said, we're going to take a step also to back down a bit to give a confidence-building measure a chance to survive and work. That's how you negotiate. That's what I'm really concerned about, that Mr. Clapper's statement was absolutely correct, that this president may not know how to negotiate, may not know the history of North Korea-U.S. relations, the fact that we've never signed a peace treaty with them. All of these things have to be brought, and this president does not have the details of history or diplomacy or the judgment sometimes to reciprocate and be able to keep things under control in a crisis.
Good point from
Yes,
thanks,
we're going to squeeze in a very quick break. Stay with us, everyone. The conversation continues. We are live from Los Angeles with CNN Newsroom LA, so do stay with us. Lots more to come. President Trump says American history and heritage are under threat, but not everyone hears the same thing.
Was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? That's what...
Welcome back, everybody. Coming up to 20 minutes past 11 here on the West Coast. You're watching CNN, and that was Donald Trump. Was one of the highlights of a very controversial speech. Another one, which he made a short time ago in Phoenix, Arizona. He was talking about Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who is not doing his job right now because he actually is facing charges of contempt after a judge ordered him to stop racially profiling Latinos in Arizona. So our panel back with us again. And John, you know, the White House said one thing that, the local officials in Phoenix, rather, were concerned. The one thing that could set off violence here in Phoenix was if Donald Trump pardoned Sheriff Joe. He didn't do that, technically, but he came very close. Listen to this.
So, was Sheriff Joe convicted for doing his job? That's what... He should have had a jury, but you know what? I'll make a prediction. I think he's going to be just fine, okay?
And Arpaio was actually convicted of criminal contempt. So, you know, it would seem to be a tough argument to make that you're not a racist while you're about to pardon a man who's been found guilty and convicted of essentially, you know, racist acts of racially profiling Latinos.
Arpaio's popular with the base. I mean, there's no question about that.
This is a man who's been found guilty of racially profiling Latinos. Donald Trump says, I'm not a racist, but I'm going to pardon a guy who is.
I mean, I think he likes the work, by and large, that Arpaio does. I think the Republican base likes the work that Arpaio has done. He didn't officially say he was going to pardon him. I think he might stretch this out. Trump knows how to drive ratings, so we'll see what he does. I mean, he didn't officially say what he'll do.
Dave, to bring you in here, I mean, John and Austin keep making the point that this was about the base. This was about the base. Is this speech the right way to go about holding that base together?
Look, looking through purely a political lens as a strategist, I understand that Donald Trump is at 34% according to the Gallup poll that came out last week nationwide. Like, he's almost got no place left to go. Remember, Richard Nixon was at 24% according to Gallup when he resigned from office. So Donald Trump needs to hold the base that he has. He can't go any further. And the reality is he was throwing out red meat tonight to his base. I mean, to these sort of racist, xenophobic, angry, right, like constituents that helped propel him to office. And the reality is he was defiant tonight. And his statement essentially endorsed a convicted felon who is a racist. And it validates the argument that Donald Trump is a racist. Donald Trump, who last week equated anti-Nazi protesters to neo-Nazis and white supremacists. The reality is this is further evidence that Donald Trump is a racist.
Okay, I want to bring Peter in because, Peter, smart politics doesn't actually mean it's smart policy or it's actually good for the country.
That's correct. Public policy has to be public interest. It has to serve the whole country. And Trump is not doing that. He's looking at a very narrow slice of the pie, which he wants to retain just to hopefully win back, keep the Senate and the House in his hands. It has to do with Congress as well. The election they're up for in 2018. And if he's only considered himself to be a politician, but not a leader, not a statesperson, not someone who wants to lead this country in the right direction, he will not be successful, and neither will the Congress itself, which is at lowest popularity ratings right now, especially the Republicans in Congress. So this has to be turned around. It's not good policy. Politics that may be good for him to get possibly reelected, which I don't think he will, is not good policy in terms of public interest, and that's what we have to look for.
Caroline, to bring you in here, I mean, I guess the question is this President Trump's view of what leadership is? I mean, or is it that he just doesn't know how to lead? I mean, which one is it in your view?
I think it's amateur hour at the White House. I think he's demonstrated that full well. But I would agree that he has nowhere to go but his base. His base has actually shrunk. Those who say that they strongly support Donald Trump has gone from 30% to 20% since May. There's a reason why people like Joe Arpaio in his base. It's because they are demonstrably higher in racial resentment and xenophobia. They elected a man who was the head of the birther movement after 8 years because they were triggered by the first black president. It's not a matter of opinion. It's actually a matter of data, and Donald Trump knows that, so he is pitching to his base, especially after he disaffected so many in his base last night with his Afghanistan speech, which was actually reasonable policy.
Austin, I just want to ask you, as an American, as a citizen of this country, do you think that what Donald Trump did tonight was good? Was this good for the country?
Listen, I think that's probably a pretty subjective question. I mean, listen. I mean, do I listen? Like I said, you know, I'm not on here to necessarily defend everything he does. I would say this, you know, as a Republican, when people kind of label, they kind of bucket label us as you know, Nazis or whatever, you know, anti-this or pro that. You know, I think at some point we have to look inward and say, okay, listen, what is it that we've done as a political party that maybe we believe that sticks with some people? But I think likewise, the media should take some responsibility. You know, listen, he's throwing these things out there and it's sticking with lots of people. Why is that? What has the media done? You know, what has, you know, the failure for the media to call these protesters, you know,
You're not answering the question.
I'm going to take that as you don't think.
Yeah, I mean, is what he...
I think it is good. I think
are these speeches, are these moments good for the country?
I think refocusing on the basics of solving and fixing the illegal immigration problem is good for all Americans because it lifts up all boats. It helps create more good-paying jobs for working Americans that are American citizens.
But the language and the tone and the dog whistles.
If that's what he has to do to drive his policies and get something done.
But is it though?
No, it's actually counter.
No, but the broader point that I was trying to make is that it's not just the president doesn't exist in a bubble, right? And POTUS is not, you know, speaking and we're just all listening. I mean, we're having a dialogue and we're hearing xenophobe and these words are being thrown around. So our discussion is as divisive as what maybe you would label.
No, it's labeling reality. It's labeling what the actions and behaviors of
There were some good things discussed. There were some policy references made. I haven't heard one discussion of those. I mean,
we're going to get to that.
But here's the reality. Real quick, if I could just jump in. This was a line in the sand. This was a line in the sand moment opportunity for a lot of Republicans, right? We saw last week you had Marco Rubio who came out and condemned the president. You had several Republicans, Bob Corker, of course, who basically said Donald Trump doesn't understand the character of this nation.
Hated Donald Trump since moment.
But he was on the short list for Secretary of State. The reality is there are some Republicans who have capitalized on this opportunity to say, you know what, neo-Nazism isn't the Republican brand. And you know what, I applaud those Republicans. But Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and too many Republicans
Did you watch the beginning of his speech when he condemned the KKK?
Okay.
I mean,
break time.
Break time. And Peter will get to you after the break.
Peter, promise.
Okay, thank you.
Keep the thought, okay?
All right. Very quick break because there is so much to discuss. Stay with us. We are live here on the West Coast. A lot to discuss, including the surprising length to which President Trump says he's willing to go to build that wall.
Welcome back, everybody, to CNN Newsroom. We are live from Los Angeles. It is just gone 11:30 here on the West Coast. We are covering President Trump's campaign rally in Arizona just a few hours ago. It was classic Trump from last year's campaign. He played all his greatest hits and added a few instant classics as well.
What was once crooked Hillary has become the crooked media, and the Republican-controlled Congress is filling in for the establishment after their failure to pass a repeal bill for Obamacare. And, of course, his signature promise, the wall. Here's a renewed commitment to build it.
Believe me, if we have to close down our government, we're building that wall.
Well, back with us, Democratic strategist Caroline Hellman, CNN political commentators, Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson, and Republican consultant John Thomas. My lot.
We've got to get you guys the short title. Also, Republican strategist Austin James and Cypress College political science professor Peter Mathews. Dave, first you. We've now gone from Mexico is going to pay for the wall to we'll shut down the government and make Congress pay for the wall.
I mean, that's which is crazy, right? Like, we're going to shut down the government. Think about that for a second. The Republicans control government, right? Like, I just don't understand the calculus here. Like, how does that help him move the ball forward? You've got no dialogue with Mitch McConnell. You've got a terrible relationship with Paul Ryan. A number of Republicans are starting to come out and skewer the president. The reality is he's not going to be able to get anything done if he continues to throw out these threats.
I mean, Austin, to bring you in, really, the president's saying he's willing to shut down the government for a war? If you're a Republican in Congress, you're thinking what right now?
Listen, I don't know anybody who's reaching across the aisle to help in this moment, but I will say this. I don't necessarily know this is a bad thing. I mean, what he's trying to basically get across is say, listen, if nothing gets done, it's not me, it's them. And he's isolating the media for anything that maybe comes out that's not positive. He's isolating the Republicans. He's certainly isolating Democrats. I don't know if that's not a bad thing. I mean, this will all play out.
Okay, Peter, to you, Austin seems to think it's not a bad thing shutting down the government. How does the stock market react? How does the global economy react to if there is, in fact, a government shutdown?
Well, they won't react very well at all, but I'd like to make a point about policy, two policy points. One is if you look at the fact that Donald Trump won the electoral votes, but he also lost the popular vote by 3 million, he did it because the Macolmb County, Michigan voters, who voted for Barack Obama, by the way, in 2008 and 2012, they voted for Donald Trump because they lost manufacturing jobs. They were not replaced by retraining for new jobs. Trump is not addressing that part of it. And the wall, he talks about shutting off the illegal immigration. The folks that come from south of the border don't come here for the good food or the good weather that we have, which we do. They come here because they're looking for work. And NAFTA and free trade has been a major problem, and the neglect of working class people. And so I think he needs to put this together. Trump needs to look at the overall picture and stop scapegoating and blaming one portion of the population or this or that and neglecting the real voters. So I think it would be a terrible thing to shut down the government. At the same time, he's got to address some real underlying causes of our problems right now, which he's not doing very well, in my view.
Okay. Caroline?
Well, I want to dispel the myth that economic anxiety is what drove this election. I hope that every CNN viewer goes and Googles some of the studies that have come out. It wasn't economic anxiety. In fact, Hillary Clinton won amongst working class voters in these swing states. It was racial resentment. It was high rates of xenophobia and high rates of ethnocentrism.
People who voted for Barack Obama twice are now racist in 2016. Is that what happened?
I am saying that it was not driven by economic anxiety.
So, but you're saying people
You're making an argument. No, I'm not saying that at all. It's not the same people turning out to vote. I am saying Trump voters are demonstrably higher in racial resentment, actually sexism as well, xenophobia and ethnocentrism. And I'm not making this up. Everyone should go Google this. It wasn't economic anxiety. He is pitching to his base and is not.
This is exactly why Democrats are going to lose in the midterms, because they think we are a bunch of racists, misogynists, that is simply all we care about, when in fact we're economically driven. And the Democrats still have yet to address the economy. It's all about identity.
Well, I will say that I do agree a little bit with my frenemy over there, John Thomas. The reality is, I think it was one of the miscalculations of the Clinton campaign was that we didn't have the economy out front and center. It was Bill Clinton in 1992 who campaigned on "It's the economy, stupid." And I think that wasn't on the forefront of the dialogue enough. I know that Hillary was talking about it. She did have comprehensive blueprints for how to sort of fix the economy, how to lift up working families, but I don't think it was on the forefront of the dialogue from her campaign enough. And we as Democrats, I think, need to address some of the economic injustices in this country. We've got to put forward a bold plan on how to lift wages and how to grow this economy and help, build the middle class back to where it used to be. And the reality is the Democrats in Washington haven't been putting forward that message, but a lot of these candidates who are running up and down the ballot all across the country have a ton of new ideas, and I think we need to put those in terms of
the polls still don't reflect that. I think they reflect what John was mentioning, was essentially that the Democrats are seen as a party that's mostly anti-Trump, and your rhetoric is actually falling right into that same trap. And so I think John's absolutely right.
Well, it's not rhetoric, it's data. I'm sorry, but the speech tonight confirms that he is ascended to the presidency on identity politics by making people who are fearful of a shifting social order allay those fears, right? He talked about Arpaio, who is about racial profiling.
Illegal immigration affects every facet of industry in Arizona, from top to bottom.
You know what? Illegal immigrants, people who are here illegally, are actually growing our fruit and working jobs that other people won't.
Have you been to Arizona? It is absolutely on the forefront of almost every citizen's mind there. Absolutely.
You know why it is? Because we have had 8 years.
I believe his charges were
we have had 8 years of propaganda media media from the right making this a much bigger issue than it is. The fact of the matter is people who are not here legally have lower crime rates than people who were born here, and they pay an average of $80,000 in social service and taxes over the course of their lifetime.
I think you just put a punctuation on John's sentiment, and this is why you're going to lose.
Okay. Good place to stop.
And a good reason to have kept you apart, it seems, that you're over there and you're over there.
It is 37 minutes past 11, and we will take a short break. Coming up next here on News from LA, is Donald Trump really the greatest American president in the first 6 months of his term ever? He says he is. We'll be back.
I don't believe that any president has accomplished as much as this president in the first 6 or 7 months. I really don't believe.
Well, welcome back, everyone. We're live on the West Coast, and our panel is still with us. I want to go straight to Peter Mathews, who is our political science buff. Peter, straight to you. You heard what the president said. No president has accomplished as much as he has. You're the one with all the history facts. Is he telling the truth?
Absolutely not. I mean, he can think that or dream it, but if you look at other presidents who have accomplished some real, not a significant piece of legislation was passed or signed by Congress or signed by him in these last 6 months. Mostly executive orders, which were just miniature, minor things to do, and he was not able to get anything through Congress. And we need action right now with the economy. We need action with education, with health care, and he's failed on all those accounts, unfortunately, for him, but also for the United States, for the American people. So I would say he's exaggerating considerably.
Okay, because I don't want to ask you guys, because clearly we know what you're going to say.
We know where you're going.
So I want to now move on to McConnell and this feud.
No. Oh, really?
It's just over 6 months.
Yeah, okay. Look, we want to move on to because there's this open feud now between Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, the Republican majority leader in the Senate, and Donald Trump. The New York Times is reporting they haven't spoken for weeks, adding this. Angry phone calls and private bad-mouthing have devolved into open conflict, with the president threatening to oppose Republican senators who cross him, and McConnell mobilizing their defense. So, John, to you, politics is about addition. It's about adding to your base. It's about finding friends. It's about growing your support. This president is doing the absolute opposite of that, it seems.
I can imagine both sides are frustrated. McConnell's frustrated. He probably blames the president, and that's why he can't get things done in the Senate and couldn't control his own Republicans. And I'm sure the president's furious that the Congress has not been able to get... So it's just finger-pointing at this point. You're right, it's not productive for the process, but both people are so angry, and McConnell could see his majority slipping away because at the end of the day, Congress's approval is far worse than Donald Trump's, and their approval is so low largely because they haven't been able to get anything done.
Dave, to you, the president in the speech in Phoenix didn't call John McCain out by name or Jeff Flake, the other senator from Arizona, but clearly sent some jabs in their direction. He's taking on Mitch McConnell. He's taking on the other senators. I mean, what's the fallout here on Capitol Hill for President Trump employing such a strategy?
Look, playing politics is all about coalition building and whipping votes. And the reality is, if you're going to create and alienate, with folks in your own party, whether it's Jeff Flake or John McCain, or Susan Collins was on one of the networks the other day who said that she's not even in a position where she'd be willing to endorse the president in 2020. So the reality is, if he can't get to 51 votes, or even to 50 votes, right? Because it's unprecedented that you've had the vice president come in and be the tiebreaker. But if you can't count to 50 plus 1 votes, you can't get anything done. That means he can't deliver on his agenda. And ultimately, what that means is the supporters that he's built up and that he's, carried throughout his campaign, and the 34% that he's sort of maintained, that's going to start to erode even further.
And also, McConnell is tougher than a $2 steak. He knows the game. He plays it well. Donald Trump is a novice in all of this. Trump probably needs McConnell more than McConnell needs Trump right now.
Yeah, and listen, I think from an objective political standpoint, I'm not sure. I mean, that article was pretty scathing, certainly. I would say, though, that I think Donald Trump is making he's making a political judgment, one that he's made, I think, to the, thus far in his campaign and certainly in his presidency, is that he's trying to isolate enemies, so to speak. And to be fair, I think it's actually worked pretty well for them. Those who have been have gotten in his way, he's kind of isolated and removed. And I think he's trying to play that now with Mitch McConnell. Listen, there's no secret that there's no love lost among the Republican base with Mitch McConnell. So I think it's a political gamble, and I think it may play out well for him. I don't know.
Caroline?
It, of course, it's not going to play out well for him. I don't think that at all, and nobody who knows how the government is supposed to work would think that, right? Because the president needs the Senate and the House, obviously, to get his agenda through. through, the idea that somehow he can take out some petty or personal issue with Mitch McConnell puts his entire agenda in jeopardy. But the thing is, I don't think he knows that. I don't think he realized that there were other branches of government when he came in. I think he thought he was going to sign a pen, with his pen, and things were just going to magically happen. Well, and he hasn't learned. On-the-job training has not worked for Donald Trump.
But I think what he's placing his bets on, and again, I'm kind of speaking from kind of the outside looking in here, is I think that he's maybe not removing Mitch McConnell, but basically squeezing him. And like
you don't squeeze the person you're supposed to be working with in order to pass major policies.
But I think that's how he's. We've got the debt ceiling coming up. You've got to raise the debt ceiling. You've got to get a budget through. You've got a government shutdown.
The Republicans aren't going to shoot themselves in the foot.
He has.
Well,
he has.
Republicans as a party are not going to shoot themselves in the foot.
Really?
He's basically playing that gamble.
Okay.
Well, the reality is, you've got look. I mean, you've got in the House. You've got the House Freedom Caucus. They're going to have massive demands, of course, with the debt ceiling, right? They're not going to want funding for Planned Parenthood. But then if you strip that out, then you're going to have the moderates in the House, right? You're going to have all this chaos and dysfunction with the House. And then in the Senate, you still have to count to 50+1, whether it's the Nevada Senator Dean Heller or a number of other folks, right? He's going on and proactively attacking these folks.
Good way to get to impeachment if you get rid of those two senators. Breaks.
I was going to say, chaos and dysfunction is a good place to leave it.
Peter, stay with us. We're going to get a quick break in once again. You're
yes.
CNN. We're live. We're very live.
Yes, very lively as well. Stay with us. After threats of fire and fury against North Korea, President Trump seems to think things are looking better, while he says Kim Jong-un is starting to respect the U.S.
Nine minutes until the top of the hour, everybody. Welcome back. President Donald Trump has also called out North Korea's leader during his campaign rally, saying he believes he is winning the respect of Kim Jong-un.
And you see what's going on in North Korea. All of a sudden, I don't know, who knows? But I can tell you what I said, that's not strong enough. Some people said it was too strong. It's not strong enough. But Kim Jong-un, I respect the fact that I believe he is starting to respect us. I respect that fact.
Meantime, North Korean media report Kim Jong-un has ordered increased production of solid fuel rocket engines and warhead tips.
Okay, back to our panel. And Peter, to you, to be fair, apparently that report came out before Donald Trump talked about respect, Kim Jong-un's respect for him. But do you believe that in some ways, maybe the bellicose language that we did hear from Donald Trump when it came to North Korea, has it actually worked in this one instance?
I say it hasn't worked because North Korea is going full force forward and getting those rocket engines. And it has to go back to what Trump doesn't understand, and that is that what has happened with North Korea is they're concerned about getting regime change like Iraq was, and they want to make sure that won't happen to them. And I think Donald Trump needs to be able to negotiate with them, like the agreed framework under which Bill Clinton actually agreed for 8 or 10 years, kept the negotiations going, and agreed to give them fuel and build light water nuclear reactors in exchange for them shutting down heavy water reactors and not building any bombs. And for 10 years it worked that way, until that was changed when George Bush came in. And Donald Trump needs to know the history of that and go back to that and agree to maybe do some confidence building. Let's say we won't continue these war games every year. We'll hold back this year, since North Korea agreed not to attack the Guam. We'll hold back on the war games in order to build confidence building measures and negotiate that way. And I think instead, Donald Trump is being more brinkmanship and belligerent, and it's going to cause, it could be a miscalculation. And we know what could happen with miscalculation. World War I was started that way. So I think that he has to really change his ways on that.
John, to pick up on what Peter was saying, I mean, engaging with North Korea is a long game. It's not something that is solved overnight. Does the president realize that to be claiming what seems to be some kind of victory,
Well, I think Bannon's statements, the on-the-record statements, the off-the-record statements a couple days ago kind of show that the White House does understand that they've got really no good options here. So I think the president does understand that, but the president also understands that the United States needs to be respected, and sometimes that means being feared. And so he's taking it to North Korea. And look, just a couple days ago, we thought Guam might be wiped off the map. So I think the president's tone is appropriate, especially it's so stark in contrast to the last 8 years with Barack Obama, who would draw a red line, they'd cross it and say, now I really mean it this time,
right.
Don't,
Sorry to cut you off, but we are short on time. I want to get to NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So, Caroline, it was being ripped up during the campaign, then it was going to be renegotiated a couple of months ago. Now it's back to being ripped up. There is this uncertainty, and it seems like this comment was made simply to please the people at this crowd tonight.
Absolutely. He's playing to the base, right, because he doesn't have any remarkable policies to show. His infrastructure plan is a 6-page memo with bullet points. NAFTA, which looks a lot like TPP, which he rejected and now is, talking out both sides of his mouth. At the end of the day, all Donald Trump has done in the last 6 months is, with the help of other Republicans, steal a Supreme Court seat, and that's not a successful president. Well, it is. It's a theft.
Right to appoint.
No, it's actually a gray area, and I find I'm concerned about that, and I would be concerned constitutionally. I would be concerned if my party did it to your party.
Okay. Austin, 10 seconds very quickly.
And then you get another
point to the one thing that Donald Trump's done in the last.
Oh, listen, I think you look at the VA.
One thing. The VA. Okay.
The fact that according to Richard Spence, the leader of the alt-right movement, Donald Trump, who Richard tweeted after the speech tonight that Donald Trump still has not denounced the alt-right movement.
Unemployment's at a 14-year low.
Which could be argued was a legacy of President Obama, but we shall leave it at that.
It all ends now.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Austin and John, Peter, Caroline, and David, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for the great conversation.
Late here in Los Angeles.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. You've been watching CNN Newsroom live from Los Angeles. I'm Aisha Sasay.
I'm John Fors. Early Start is up next for our viewers in the United States. For everyone else, CNN Newsroom will be with you after a very short break.